we will talk now about triple negative breast cancer treatment advances. The landscape is clearly changing, and we have many aspects to be discussed today, and I will try to do it in about maybe 40 minutes, something like that, to have some times afterwards for discussion. So these are my disclosures. Let me make some comments about introduction. Apologize because this is something that you all know very well, but just to introduce how triple negative breast cancer behaves and what we are talking about. So introduction, just for us to remember. So breast cancer is a leading cause of cancer deaths in women. About 15.5% of cancers in women produces die because of breast cancer. And we have about 2.3 million new breast cancer patients in the world yearly. And in the females, it is about 24% of all tumors. It is 12% if we consider both male and females. So triple negative breast cancer is defined today as ER negative, PR negative, and HER2 negative. And it is true that this is a very heterogeneous disease, both from the biological perspective. You can see here different approaches from the biological perspective. We have basically two ways of approaching this based on the different subtypes, luminal A, luminal B, basal, or HER2 enriched. All of them can be entered in the triple negative breast cancer definition. But when we specifically look at the triple negative, it's very interesting to see the Lehmann classification with the basal LAIC-1R2, immunomodulatory subtype, mesenchymal, or the luminal androgen receptor subtypes. Basically, these different subtypes upregulate different pathways which explain different behaviors of the... Sorry?
Sorry, I think somebody's not muted. Could you please all make sure to mute your microphone?
No worries. Okay, so basically, I was saying that based on these different biological perspectives, the prognostic is different from some tumors compared with others. But when we go to the clinic, we can also see different types of triple negative breast cancer tumors. We have, all of us, we have some adenoid or apocrine medullary tumors that we sometimes discuss if we need to use chemotherapy or not. And on the other hand, we have some patients with very, very aggressive invasive ductal carcinoma or pleomorphic tumors, or etc., metaplastic high grade. So clearly, from a biological perspective, different tumor types. From the clinical perspective, different behaviors. So it is also true that triple negative breast cancer is associated with different characteristics. For example, it's more frequent in Black people, more frequent in premenopausal women, in patients with germline BRCA mutations, also younger compared with elder patients. So I think that we might have some characteristics that might be more frequent compared with the others. Finally, just to remember that usually the risk of recurrence is completely different compared with ER-positive tumors. So it is very highly or very likely to recur during the first 3 to 4, 5 years. But once the 5th year is over, this tumor is basically cured. It's very difficult for this tumor to come back again. With ER-positive tumors, we have a recurrence which is maintained over time. Finally, don't forget that this is a tumor that might metastasize in many organs, including basically brain, lung, or liver. When we look at the median overall survival over the last 20 years, we can see something very disappointing. You can see here, according to this paper published in ESMO Open 2-3 years ago, that the median overall survival has been basically the same over the last years. We have not had important treatments which have changed the prognosis of this disease. It is true that last 2 to 3 years, we have started to understand there are different biomarkers, different transmembrane proteins that might be expressed or not, And based on these proteins, we might select different treatment options. And this is something that has been correlated with improvement in survival. So in the last 2 to 3 years, we have started to see an improvement in survival when in the last 30 to 40 years, we were unable to see. And this is basically a slide showing the great majority of the last treatments that were approved. You can see here that in the first years, it was basically more and more and more chemotherapy. In the last years, we are starting to see approved targeted agents. And this is what we are going to talk today. So let's start with the early triple-negative breast cancer. This is a very important slide. When we are talking about neoadjuvant treatment, we have different reasons to do it. But last years, we have observed that a very important objective to explain the reason to do neoadjuvant treatment has been raised. So when we do neoadjuvant treatment and we explore the pathological response, we might optimize the adjuvant therapy for those patients who did not achieve pathological complete remission. So we might improve the outcomes using pathological complete response to select adjuvant treatments. If we go for upfront surgery, we will be unable to look at this surrogate endpoint and to modify the treatment accordingly. Another important aspect about the prognosis is that we have started to see a group of patients with stage 1 and stage 2 triple-negative breast cancer with a lot of tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, more than 75%.
I'm on another one.
This data, coming from old studies, you can see here that when you have a very important, very impressive TIL infiltration, more than 75%, these patients may be cured even without the need of chemotherapy. And the other way around, without chemotherapy, when the number of TILs is lower, the prognosis is clearly worse. So now there are trials which are exploring no giving chemotherapy to triple-negative breast cancer patients if these tumors do have a lot of tumor-infiltrated lymphocytes. So let's go back to the pathological complete response. So here you can see data from Laura Sprint showing that for all tumor types, but basically triple-negative breast cancer, those patients who achieved a pathological complete remission do have much better outcomes in terms of event-free survival compared with those patients who did not achieve a pathological complete remission. And these are basically the current treatment strategies we have for triple-negative breast cancer. For early TNBC, we usually go for neoadjuvant treatment with anthracycline, taxane, with or without platinum-based strategy. If pathological complete remission, we continue with follow-up. If non-PCR, we have capecitabine or olaparib if germline BRCA mutation. For the high-risk triple-negative breast cancer, we usually combine chemotherapy plus pembrolizumab, an anti-PD-1 inhibitor, and we continue with pembrolizumab afterwards. It is true that for those patients who did not achieve PCR and received pembrolizumab, we do not know if adding capecitabine is good, adding olaparib is better than continuing with pembrolizumab, and this is something that we have to discuss with our patients in a case-to-case setting. So, patients who do not achieve pathological complete remission, we know that capecitabine given adjuvantly might improve long-term outcomes for triple-negative breast cancer, data coming from Japan, published in the New England Journal of Medicine 7 years ago. And this is today a standard of care. Is it good to administer carboplatin in the neoadjuvant setting? We had 2 randomized trials showing that both pathological complete remission were improved when carboplatin was added. In one of these trials, GEPAR-6, also event-free survival was better with carboplatin-based therapy. In the CLGB 4063, we didn't observe these better outcomes. However, the question about carboplatin was, in my opinion, ended with this important study published by Cyril Loib in Lancet Oncology 6 years ago. So patients with triple-negative breast cancer were randomized to receive in the neoadjuvant setting paclitaxel, carboplatin, beliparib, paclitaxel, well, basically, paclitaxel, carboplatin, beliparib, paclitaxel, carboplatin, placebo, beliparib, placebo, and paclitaxel, carboplatin, beliparib, placebo. So paclitaxel with or without carboplatin, with or without beliparib. What can we observe here? Beliparib did not add anything, but carboplatin did. We improved pathological and complete remissions, clearly, but also we improved event-free survival. So this was a randomized phase 3 study with more than 600 patients. And based on this study, in my opinion, carboplatin should be added at least for patients with high-risk early triple-negative breast cancer. Immunotherapy in this setting, many clinical trials. These are the two most important ones, randomized phase 3 studies, KEYNOTE-522 and JEOPARD-12 study. JEOPARD-12 is basically identical to KEYNOTE-522, but instead of adding pembrolizumab, it was added atezolizumab. This trial is still waiting for the results. We hope to have the results later this year. KEYNOTE-522, neoadjuvant, chemotherapy, taxanes, and carboplatin-based therapy with either placebo or pembrolizumab, followed by surgery, followed by placebo or pembrolizumab. Primary endpoints, both pathological complete remission and event-free survival. And here you have the key results. First, PCR was improved by about 13%. And look at here the event-free survival. For the co-primary endpoint, we observed an improvement in the rate of 8% absolute benefit at 3 years. It is true that we did not increase the total number of events, but we increased the number of immune-related adverse events. These data were updated at San Antonio last year, 2 to 3 months ago, and you can see here that the improvement in the absolute benefit after 5 years of follow-up was in the range of 9%. And when we analyzed patients with CT2 and 0, the absolute improvement with pembrolizumab was exactly the same, about 10%. What about patients who did achieve pathological complete remission or not? By either stage 2 or stage 3, not positive, not negative, those patients who received pembrolizumab behaved better regardless if they achieved pathological complete remission or not. So based on all these data, in my opinion, for stage 2 and stage 3, pembrolizumab should be considered as a new treatment of choice. We should not forget the immune-mediated adverse events, in some cases grade 3, and some cases some hypophysitis, some cases with nephritis, which might be very important, rare, but very important adverse events. So let's move now into the metastatic triple-negative breast cancer setting. And let me start with the guidelines. The guidelines are quite clear here. We will review this in detail, but remember, metastatic triple-negative breast cancer, PD-L1 positive, let's think about immunotherapy plus chemotherapy. Germline BRCA mutations, let's think about platinum-based therapy or PARP inhibitors. PD-L1 negative and germline BRCA mutations, chemotherapy, and chemotherapy. In the second-line setting, in my opinion, sacituzumab govitecan, Trodelvy, should be the preferred option. And in the third line, for HER2-low, we could discuss the role of trastuzumab deruxtecan, HER2, for HER2-0, chemotherapy, and chemotherapy, and chemotherapy. Let's start with the PD-L1 positive metastatic triple-negative breast cancer group of patients. We have 3 randomized phase 3 studies in the first-line setting, IMpassion130, IMpassion131, KEYNOTE-355. There is a 4th randomized phase 3 study called IMpassion132. This trial, primary endpoint, overall survival for patients with PD-L1 positive tumors and for tumors or for patients whose tumors relapse in the first year after the end of adjuvant treatment. This study, will be presented at ESMO Breast this year in May in Berlin. The trial was negative for the primary endpoint. So these three trials, in PASSION 130, co-primary endpoints, PFS and survival, nab-paclitaxel with or without atezolizumab. In PASSION 131, primary endpoints, PFS for PD-L1 positive tumors, paclitaxel with or without atezolizumab. KEYNOTE-355, co-primary endpoints, PFS and survival for PD-L1 positive tumors, chemo with or without pembrolizumab. Results. In PASSION 130, improvement in PFS in both ITT and PD-L1, improvement in survival, but because we designed the trial based on a hierarchical assumption, because overall survival was negative for ITT, you can see here the hazard ratio for survival for the PD-L1 positive population, 0.67, but this analysis was only exploratory in nature. So unfortunately, because the clinical trial design, we can formally say that atezolizumab improved PFS in PD-L1 positive tumors, but no overall survival. In my personal opinion, data were identical compared with KEYNOTE-355. If paclitaxel is the partner of atezolizumab, in PASSION 131 failed to demonstrate an improvement. And here you have KEYNOTE-355, pembrolizumab plus chemo was superior to placebo and chemo. PFS identical compared with in PASSION 130, and here you have the overall survival, nice improvement in overall survival for PD-L1 positive tumors. Hazard ratio 0.73, and the median overall survival moved from 16 months with chemotherapy, 23 months with chemo plus pembrolizumab. Nevertheless, very poor median overall survival. What about patients with germline BRCA mutations? We have two phase 3 trials in the metastatic disease, Olympiad and EMBRACA. Olympiad, olaparib, PARP inhibitor, versus chemotherapy. Platinum compounds were not allowed in those two studies. EMBRACA, very similar clinical trial design, talazoparib versus chemotherapy. Results: improvement in the primary endpoint, progression-free survival, very similar hazard ratio, very similar overall response rate improvement. We did not improve overall survival for the total population, but in the subgroup analysis of the Olympiad olaparib study, it seems that for those patients treated in the first-line setting, patients who received olaparib lived longer compared with patients who did not receive olaparib. The problem here is what happens if you have a patient with a germline mutation, but also PD-L1 inhibitor. Well, that's a matter of debate. I would prefer to use pembrolizumab and go for olaparib in the second line, but again, matter of debate. There is a third randomized phase 3 study, which I like a lot, which is BROCADE-3. In this trial, patients, once again with germline BRCA1 and or BRCA2 mutations, were randomized to receive carboplatin, paclitaxel, placebo, carboplatin, paclitaxel, beliparib. Look at the curves here. When we added beliparib to carboplatin-based therapy, we did not do anything. Look at the first part of the curves. However, many patients, after a significant number of cycles with chemotherapy, stop treatment and continue with placebo or with beliparib. And beliparib behaved much better compared with placebo. So in my opinion, olaparib, talazoparib, whatever the PARP inhibitor is not superior to platinum compounds. But because of the better quality of life, we might maintain the treatment for a more prolonged period of time. So that's why I think that olaparib or talazoparib are clearly better compared even with chemotherapy based on platinum compounds. Let's move now into the antibody drug conjugates. Antibody drug conjugates basically are antibody drug conjugate, monoclonal antibody, linker, and payloads. Payloads today are chemotherapeutic molecules. This is sacituzumab govitecan. This is an anti-TROP2 antibody drug conjugate. So this binds TROP2, and it has a very high drug to antibody ratio. The payload is a topo 1 inhibitor, SN38, which is much more potent than irinotecan. What about TROP2 expression? TROP2 expression is, sorry for the word, is more expressed in tumor compared with normal tissue. Here you have some data showing that the high amount of TROP2 in the tumors compared with the parenteral normal tissue. And TROP2 has been correlated with bad prognosis, not only in breast cancer, but you can see here that in many tumor types. What about the expression of TROP2 in metastatic breast cancer? You can see here that in 88% of patients with triple-negative breast cancer, we have moderate to strong TROP2 expression in about 82% of patients with ER-positive, HER2-negative metastatic breast cancer. So basically, it's widely expressed in breast cancer. Based on preliminary data, the ASCEND study was conducted. This is a randomized phase 3 study. Patients received 2 prior lines of therapy, at least one of them in a metastatic setting. Patients were randomized to receive sacituzumab govitecan or treatment of physician's choice. Primary endpoint was progression-free survival. And here you have the great data. Median PFS has a ratio of 0.41, moving from 1.7 months median PFS with chemotherapy to more than 5.6 months with sacituzumab govitecan. Also, we can see doubling the median overall survival and overall response rate 5% with chemotherapy, 35% with SG, 7 times higher. Based on this data, sacituzumab govitecan is today the standard of care, in my opinion, in the second-line treatment. The primary endpoint was in patients with known brain metastases, but when we include all patients, patients without or patients with brain metastases, we can see that the numbers are identical. So, in my opinion, we should not consider brain metastases to use or not sacituzumab govitecan. What about the TROP2 expression? We can observe here that TROP2 might have worse outcomes, but the benefit of sacituzumab govitecan was exactly the same, regardless the expression of TROP2. Based on this data, we do not have to look at TROP2 expression for the clinical practice. And finally, how does it compare with the different chemotherapeutic drugs? You can see here, this slide, that sacituzumab behaved superior, regardless the type of chemotherapy the patients received. What about toxicity? So basically, this drug has 2 important adverse events: neutropenia and diarrhea. Grade 3 for neutropenia, 50% of patients, 51%, 34% grade 3, 17% grade 4. Nevertheless, febrile neutropenia, 5 to 6%. And diarrhea, all grades, 60%, grade 3, 10%, grade 4, 0%. You can see here some specific data about neutropenia. I will tell you something. We will present, hopefully, at ESMO Breast, the PRIME study. In the PRIME study, we gave G-CSF prophylactically and loperamide to try to avoid neutropenia, to try to avoid diarrhea. We will present this data at ESMO Breast, but I can tell you that the numbers, the data, are really very good. we will see this data in 2 to 3 months. So here you have the data. No patients had to discontinue treatment because of neutropenia if they received sacituzumab govitecan. Nausea and vomiting, just remember that we have to pre-medicate patients with at least 2 drugs, but I would recommend to go for a 3-drug combination regimen: corticosteroids, ondansetron, and aprepitant. That's what I would recommend. And with this prophylactic treatment, usually we do not see a significant number of patients with nausea and or with vomiting. Last but not least, diarrhea. As I said before, in this study, we did not prevent diarrhea with loperamide, but the primary study we did it, and we clearly decreased the numbers. We'll see this data in 2 to 3 months. So once again, we had to reduce the dose in a small number of patients, about 5%, but we did not have to discontinue a treatment based on diarrhea. Last years, we have started to talk about HER2. HER2 low is not a new entity. HER2 low is a new biomarker. HER2 low is defined today as HER2 1+ or HER2 2+ is negative. So about ER-positive tumors, 60% of these tumors do have HER2 low expression. In triple-negative breast cancer, about 30 to 40% of these patients do have HER2 low tumors. Why is it important? Because we have another antibody drug conjugate which targets HER2 and has been recently approved by many authorities. This is trastuzumab deruxtecan, is an anti-HER2 ADC, antibody drug conjugate, very similar payload compared with SG, another topo 1 inhibitor, also very high drug to antibody ratio in the range of 8, and these 2 agents, T-DXd and also SG, do have bystander effect, which means that once the payload is released, it can cross the neighboring membrane cells. This is DESTINY-Breast04. This is a study, randomized phase 3. Careful. With the primary endpoint in patients with hormone receptor positive tumors. It is true that there was an exploratory analysis in 58 patients with triple-negative breast cancer, but HER2 low. T-DXd or chemotherapy in second, third line. Here you have the data for the hormone receptor positive tumors, clearly positive. This is the standard of care for HER2 low, ER positive. It is true that when you look at the data in the triple-negative breast cancer cohort, also there are significant, very good data, has a ratio identical compared with the ASCENT, but this belongs to a small number of patients. With exploratory analysis, ASCENT was a formal phase 3 study. In my opinion, trastuzumab deruxtecan is the standard of care in second, third line for hormone receptor positive tumors. Trastuzumab govitecan is the standard of care for triple-negative breast cancer, regardless the expression of HER2. Also, we should not forget the toxicity this drug has. Basically, 3 things. Very impressive nausea, vomiting. 73% of patients do have nausea, all grades. Neutropenia in the range of 50%, all grades. But very importantly, my friends, ILD pneumonitis. 12% in this study, 16% in other studies of patients developed grade 1 or grade 2 pneumonitis. Don't forget that's number of patients in the range of 2 to 4% in all trials develop grade 3, 4, or 5 ILD pneumonitis. So this is a very serious adverse event that has to be diagnosed early on time and treated accordingly. We should not wait and see. We should treat as soon as ILD pneumonitis appears. Left ventricular ejection fraction dysfunction, not very frequent, but this is a drug that we should take care, be careful, because in the range of 5%, we might observe some type of dysfunction. Finally, in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes, what about the future direction for antibody-drug conjugates? Let me try to make some comments about the mechanisms of resistance. We do not have many data exploring mechanism of resistance. This is a beautiful study published in Cancer Discovery, and it was basically conducted in MGH in Harvard, in Boston, and they took biopsies for a patient who received sacituzumab govitecan, and they took different biopsies from the same patients. And they demonstrated that even in the same patient, different mechanisms of resistance happen. The two most important ones were, first, to have mutations in topo1. This is important because the payload did not have more activity in topo1. Second, mutations, alterations in TROP2. Again, very important because these tumors were unable to be binded by SG. So if we produce alteration in topo1 or in TROP2, SG might not bind the receptor, or if it binds the receptor and is internalized, the payload might not work. Nevertheless, the more we understand about the mechanism of action of this antibody-drug conjugate, the more we understand that there are many potential mechanisms of resistance that should be addressed and should be explored in the next future. Another important aspect. Do antibody-drug conjugates work in a sequential way? The first answer is yes. This is DESTINY-Breast02. Patients who all received T-DM1, when we gave T-DXd, much better outcomes compared with chemotherapy and trastuzumab or lapatinib. So clearly, antibody-drug conjugates work after antibody-drug conjugates. But is it the case in the HER2-negative space when both trastuzumab deruxtecan and sacituzumab govitecan do have a very similar payload? And what will happen with the many other antibody-drug conjugates which are upcoming? San Antonio, 2023, there were 4 real-world evidence data showing the activity of the first antibody-drug conjugate and the second antibody-drug conjugate. 3 major conclusions. The first one, the median PFS with the first antibody-drug conjugate was clearly superior compared with the second antibody-drug conjugate. Second, we do not have good data to suggest that it's better to start with T-DXd and afterwards SG, or the other way around. Moreover, we have data which shows that it's better to start with SG, and trials or studies which show that it's better to start with deruxtecan. And 3, there are ongoing clinical trials which are prospectively explore the sequential strategy of these 2 antibody-drug conjugates, TROP2 and HER2. There are many other antibody-drug conjugates in clinical development, many others, like daratumumab against LIV-1, very provocative and good data, patritumab deruxtecan against HER3, but there are many, many others. Can we optimize the activity of antibody-drug conjugates? Certainly we can. For example, combining with different drugs. Some of the most interesting one is combining antibody-drug conjugates with immunotherapy for both PD-L1 negative and PD-L1 positive. There are beautiful preclinical data showing that the microenvironment under treatment with antibody-drug conjugate changes and is more immunogenic. So we might transform cold tumors to inflamed tumors. The future. This is, in my opinion, these are the most important or interesting clinical trials which are upcoming. TROPION-Breast02, first line, triple-negative breast cancer, PD-L1 negative, datopotamab deruxtecan, another anti-TROP2 inhibitor, antibody-drug conjugate, versus chemotherapy, first line. Same study, ASCENT-03, but instead with datopotamab, this is with sacituzumab govitecan, same study. And ASCENT-04 for the PD-L1 positive tumors, SG plus pembrolizumab, chemotherapy plus pembrolizumab. I think that all these trials will be positive. What about the early breast cancer setting? So this TROPION-Breast03, after non-pathological complete remission, patients will continue with standard of care or datopotamab plus durvalumab. With sacituzumab govitecan, two important clinical trials, SASIA, adjuvant treatment, sacituzumab govitecan of physician choice, and I love the optimized RD or ASCENT-05. After pembrolizumab in the neoadjuvant setting, non-PCR, patients will continue with either pembrolizumab or CAPE, pembrolizumab or sacituzumab. This is going to be a positive study, and we just have to wait and see the amount of positivity. So I would like to conclude with this slide. Very clear guidelines here. Immunotherapy for PD-L1, PARP inhibitors for germline, chemotherapy for the rest, sacituzumab govitecan clear standard of care, but we need to do it better. How? In my opinion, combining antibody conjugates with different agents and moving these drugs into the earlier lines of therapy. So Kasia, folks, I would like to stop here. I'm more than happy to start a discussion if needed. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Cortes. That was a fantastic presentation. You addressed a lot of the, I think, burning questions that people have in terms of, thoughts around treatment.